The following is an extract from The Fourth Way by P.D. Ouspensky, a question and answer session with his people in London. Question: what is the connection between civilization of the world and personal evolution? Answer: we do not realize that the beginning of many activities in life is the work of conscious people. We think that all the work we see was begun and continued by people such as we are, by sleeping people. But sleeping people can only accidentally invent something useful, and they invent both useful and harmful things with equal pleasure. They cannot distinguish the one from the other. If we accept the word civilization, it is the work of sleeping people, so there is no guarantee. There may be civilization today and barbarism tomorrow. Supposing that what you or someone else calls civilization destroys influences B, and you find yourself surrounded by influences A, you will have no chance. And indeed, what we ordinarily call civilization does destroy influences B. Revolutions destroy, wars destroy, civilizations destroy. Everything destroys esoteric influences. For instance, schools have always been destroyed by wars. That is a well-known fact. Schools cannot be established permanently. It is not exactly that wars intended to destroy schools. They did it, by the way. War is one of these institutions in the life of humanity which make work impossible and destroy schools. Schoolwork needs a certain amount of normality in life. If life becomes too abnormal, schoolwork becomes impossible and a school disappears. Question: but people who profit by schoolwork do not disappear. What they learned would not leave them? Answer: if they learned enough, they will profit by it. But if they only learned a little, they cannot profit much. There is a certain standard, a certain amount of knowledge necessary, and if you acquire this amount, you can continue to work. But if you did not get enough, you cannot. Individual people, if they have reached a certain stage in development of consciousness, can isolate themselves from circumstances and can continue to work so long as they remain alive. But school is under different laws. It needs an external form. Schools can do nothing about it. They have to take circumstances as they are, both big and small schools, elementary or highly developed. They have to exist in whatever circumstances they find themselves, and if circumstances become impossible, schools become impossible. This must be kept in mind. There is another thing in connection with this. Religion is a more stable thing. Maybe it was organized in that way in order to exist, but schools cannot be organized in the same way. They need a certain minimum of security to survive. Question: why has the influence of the esoteric circles been diminishing lately? Answer: people are becoming less and less sane. They need less truth and are more incapable of distinguishing it, and more easily satisfied with lies. Interest in these ideas is much less, and people's preparation is much less than even 30 or 40 years ago. And this is not only the result of political events, although they also have their part in it. Question: in what sense do you mean people are less prepared? Answer: for instance, the idea of esotericism was not explained in St. Petersburg. It was supposed to be known. Now it can no longer be assumed that the psychological method of thinking, the existence of esotericism, and the need for schools of an esoteric origin is understood. We can never understand the meaning of esotericism and the inner circles of humanity until we understand that life is chaos and that things, instead of becoming more controlled and orderly, are becoming only more complicated and less controlled. We take complication for progress. In ordinary life, people's actions are not coordinated and results are unforeseen. Each man works in his own direction, and the combined results produce things. Results in life are the results of cross purposes, not the results of intentional actions. It is necessary to understand that this is always so in the outer circle, and it cannot be different. We can do nothing to change this state of affairs. We are corks on the waves which think that they control currents. It is very important to think about that and to look at things from this point of view. If one does not understand the difference between the inner and the outer circles, one will not understand further. What is possible in the inner circles is impossible in our circle. Question. Should not the present state of the world make more people look for schools? People are frightened, they feel uncomfortable. Answer. Why should one discomfort lead to another discomfort? Do you think that will make them come? You expect too much of them. You can say to a man that if he studies the system he will be more awake, but you cannot say he will be better off. Question. They will get rid of identification. Answer. And they will say that they cannot work without identification, and if they are not identified they will lose all their money. There is no connection between interest in the system and the discomfort of the present situation. Question. I've been very puzzled by my observation of young people. If they are happy and thoroughly normal, the idea of esotericism does not seem to appeal to them. Answer. The idea of esotericism is very difficult. Sometimes one can catch its meaning at an early age, but often one fails to see it from the right angle. We have so many wrong attitudes and wrong ideas that nothing can be expected. I think a person who becomes seriously interested in these ideas is an exception, because people's minds are in such a confusion with absurd and contradictory ideas. Question. I am only interested in the psychological side of the system, but not in esotericism. Answer. But the psychological side is also esoteric. The system gives you nothing that is not esoteric. But the whole of it comes from minds that are not ordinary minds. It comes from people who understand things. Ordinary systems cannot bring about any change. The psychological side of the system is even more esoteric than the other side, or it would have no value. It has value only because it comes from higher minds, from their understanding and their ideas. This must be understood. We got this system somehow. If we suppose it has been created by men on the same level as we are, or that it is a theory, it has no value at all. But it is not a theory. It is supposed to come from school, from men of higher development. If there were no men of higher development, we would have no system. In the beginning, in Russia, Mr. Gurdjieff always insisted that it was not a system. It was just fragments, and one had to make a system out of them. And he insisted that it should be given in this way. Now I make it more of a system because we have more people. But when it was only a small group, it was just conversations and not lectures. In lectures it is difficult to speak in fragments, but on the whole it is still fragments all the same. These fragments are on different scales, so you must understand much to put them together on the right scale. The same words and the same theories are used in different diagrams, for instance, all on quite different scales. Question. Can you give an example of what it means that it is taught in fragments? Answer. Many things are taught like that. All about building up energies, the psychological side, the explanation of how the machine works, the side concerning the world, and so on. It is very important to understand this. Only when you begin to understand how the scale changes will you be able to understand the system. As I said, it is taught in fragments, each of which is on a different scale. You have to put them together and at the same time correct the scale. It is like several geographical maps, each on a different scale cut into pieces. You have to see which piece fits which, where the scale is very different and where it is less different. This is the only way to study this system. Question. Do you mean we cannot talk about the worlds unless we reduce them to our scale? Answer. No. What I meant is quite different. Of course we reduce everything, but what I meant is that we have to study things on different scales, and we must remember this and realize the relationship of different scales and the fact that things change with change of scale. Also we must bear in mind that about many things we believe that they mean something when actually they mean nothing at all. The system teaches us to find the difference between realities and imaginary quantities, and even worse than imaginary. Question. I feel we only have half the knowledge of the system we could have. Answer. Much less than half. Such as we are, we can only get fragments, but sufficiently big to build something out of them. We must try to understand the structure. When you have all the fragments before you, you may see certain connections, and when you find these connections, you may see many other things. Question. Have you altered the teaching much? Answer. I have not altered it, but I prefer sometimes to start from a different point. In this system, as in any organic system, one can start from any point. This is not an alteration. Everything else remains the same, but I prefer to start with the psychological side. Question. Have the people in the inner circle any control over people in the outer circle? Answer. Yes, but with many reservations. The conscious circle cannot act directly, but only through B influences. Influences C can appear only if influences B are accepted and if people look for them. Men in the inner circle cannot have control over people who do not wish to know them. They cannot use violence because it would mean a wrong triad, a wrong activity. For every kind of result there is a special triad. For instance, if people wish to acquire control, they can achieve it only in one way. If they act in another way, they will get the opposite result. Wars, revolutions, and so on never give the desired results, but always the opposite results, because wrong triads are used. If people of the inner circles wish to influence other people, they can produce good results only if there is understanding, and only with people who wish it. This is a useful question. Try to think about it. Question. You spoke of the insecure times we live in. Will the school take precautions to protect itself? I understood you to say that a school is not under the law of accident. Answer. I meant that a school cannot be formed by accident, but it can be destroyed by accident. It cannot be formed mechanically, but it can be destroyed mechanically. Take some work of art. It will not be created purely mechanically. It will be made by some special triad, but it can be burnt like anything else. Question. If schools are real living things, why do they die? Answer. What do you mean by saying that schools are living things? It is vague and indefinite. But if we take it literally, it will make it quite clear why schools die. All living beings die sooner or later. If people die, schools must also die. I have explained that schools need certain conditions. If these conditions are destroyed, the school is destroyed. Question. But the ideas may remain? Answer. Ideas cannot fly. They need human heads. And a school does not consist of ideas. You always forget that school teaches how to improve being. Question. Were no ideas written down in the past? Answer. Certainly there were, but ideas can be written down in different forms. They may be written down in such a way that nobody could read them without explanation from those who know, or without change of being. Take the Gospels. They are written in different ciphers. One must know the key to decipher them. Otherwise it would be just a story, doubtful historically and producing many wrong effects.